My husband told my mother to come collect her worthless wife, and then 60 seconds later, the street filled with black SUVs. He had just finished bragging about our divorce when the first black Escalade turned the corner. Then a second, a third, 6 in total, gleaming like obsidian in the morning rain. Every neighbor's curtain twitched. A man 2 doors down stopped trimming his hedge, his shears frozen mid-snip. Children on bicycles braked and stared. And my soon-to-be ex-husband, still clutching the signed dissolution papers, watched his carefully constructed world collapse in the span of a single minute. He had no inkling who he had just insulted. My name is Sarah, and for over a decade, I thought love meant being a steadfast anchor for someone who had forgotten how to hold steady himself. Looking back, I realized love isn't supposed to erase you. When I married Mark, we were just 2 ordinary people trying to build an ordinary life. We met in the Midwest at a community rebuilding project. I was painting porches. He was hanging drywall. We shared peanut butter sandwiches on overturned paint buckets, and he made me laugh. His family was blue-collar. His father worked at a steel plant for 35 years. Mine? Well, I never really discussed them. Our first apartment was tiny. The kitchen had no counter space. The air conditioner wheezed through every summer, and we could hear our upstairs neighbors argue every Friday night. But we were happy. We were rich in laughter, even if our bank account was empty. Mark used to tell everyone I was his greatest blessing. He'd hold my hand while we shopped, kiss my forehead before work, and thank me for having faith in him each time a promotion passed him by. I honestly believed we would grow old together. Then success began to change him. Not all at once. People don't become strangers in a day. It happens one compromise, one dismissed feeling, one overlooked kindness at a time. As his company grew, so did his circle. He started attending lavish dinners with colleagues who drove luxury cars and married women with designer wardrobes. The conversations shifted from family vacations to hedge funds and vacation homes. Slowly, his admiration for what we had turned into criticism for what we lacked. At first, it was subtle. Maybe one day we'll have a house like theirs. Then it became, I wish you were more driven. Eventually, it was, my boss's wife runs her own company. These comparisons became judgments, and the judgments became a poison that seeped into everything. I tried harder. I cooked elaborate meals. I handled every bill and planned every holiday. When his father got sick, I drove him to appointments for months, while Mark focused on quarterly reports. When he couldn't sleep over sales figures, I stayed awake with him. When he got that big promotion, I cheered louder than anyone else. But nothing was ever enough. Instead of seeing my contributions, he only focused on my perceived shortcomings. You never made 6 figures. You don't have powerful friends. You lack ambition. Each sentence felt like a brick added to a load I was expected to carry forever. And I did, because that's what wives do, or so I believed. The morning our marriage officially died began quietly. Rain pattered against the kitchen window. Coffee brewed. For a moment, I had the naive hope that we could finally talk. Instead, Mark walked in and tossed a manila envelope across the island. It stopped right in front of me. I've already signed, he said, his voice flat. You sign and we're done. I stared at the papers for a long time. 12 years, I whispered. That's all they get? He shrugged. I've moved on. I searched his face for any trace of the man I married. I found only boredom. I looked around the kitchen, at the cabinets we'd chosen together, the frames holding faded photographs, the scratches on the dining table from our nieces carving pumpkins. How did it come to this? I asked. We've talked enough, he replied, folding his arms. No, Mark. You've talked. You've judged. You've decided. I'm tired of carrying dead weight. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dead weight. Not wife. Not friend. Just an obstacle. I signed. Not because I agreed, but because I realized there was nothing salvageable. He snatched the papers before the ink was dry and smiled. Not happily, but like he'd just won a game I never knew we were playing. Then came the moment I'll never forget. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling your mother. Why? I asked, my stomach tightening. So she can collect what's hers. He hit dial. Mark, please don't. He ignored me. When my mother answered, he put it on speaker and grinned. Mrs. Harrison, come pick up your useless daughter. I don't want her anymore. There was a silence on the line. Then my mother's voice, calm and even. We'll be there in 1 minute. Click. The call ended. Mark laughed, actually laughed. Let's see what kind of junker they roll up in. I looked down at my hands because I knew exactly what was coming. There was one thing Mark had never taken the time to learn about me in 12 years. My family. He knew my parents lived comfortably. He'd seen gifts arrive and invitations to galas that he'd always declined. He assumed they were just pleasant retirees. He never asked what my father did before he retired. He never wondered why my mother was always traveling. He never questioned the names on the charity boards. He simply wasn't interested. Until now. The rumble of powerful engines echoed through our quiet neighborhood. Mark frowned. What is that? 6 black Cadillac Escalades turned onto our street, rain beating on their polished roofs. They pulled up perfectly in front of our house. Drivers in tailored suits stepped out simultaneously. Mark's grin vanished. What is this? The rear door of the center SUV opened, and my mother stepped onto the wet driveway in an elegant navy coat. Silver hair, perfect posture, quiet authority. She didn't arrive with anger. She arrived with dignity. She looked at me first, her expression softening. My sweetheart. Then she turned to Mark. She just looked at him for a long, quiet moment. One of the suited men approached her respectfully. Ma'am, everything is ready. Mark was staring at the man's jacket, at the emblem stitched there. The color drained from his face. He knew that emblem. It belonged to Harrison Holdings, the parent company that owned the investment group behind his employer. For the first time, my husband looked afraid. Harrison, he whispered. Your last name? I gave him a tired smile. I never hid it. You just never asked. One of the employees quietly asked my mother if they should retrieve my things. Only personal items, she said gently. Everything else belongs to the past. She wasn't trying to humiliate him. My mother always believed dignity speaks louder than power. She was just here for me. As they began gathering my belongings, I thought back to when we met. I told my parents about Mark. My mother asked if he knew about us. Not yet, I said. I don't want him falling in love with a name. My father nodded. Fair enough. That decision shaped a decade of my life. Not because I wanted to deceive him, but because I wanted an honest relationship, something money can't buy. I grew up wealthy, but my parents made sure I understood the value of work. My grandfather started a trucking company with one used vehicle and a dream. He drove every route, loaded every box, and balanced every ledger at the kitchen table. The business grew slowly, 1 truck to 5, 5 to 50, then warehouses and software and real estate. But my parents insulated me from that life. I went to public school, had chores, worked summer jobs. I was taught that money is a tool, not a destination. When I graduated, my father offered me a job. I refused. I want to earn my own mistakes, I said. He was proud. I lived in a small apartment, drove a used car, and worked for a nonprofit making less than my classmates. My parents respected my independence and never paid my way. Mark never questioned it. He knew my parents were comfortable, but he didn't care enough to look deeper. When my mother invited us to fundraisers, he said they weren't his thing. When they sent Christmas gifts, he barely glanced at the card. He judged by appearances, and my parents chose to appear ordinary. For the first 5 years, we were happy. Then the promotions came. Mark's new colleagues compared boats and homes. Every conversation became a competition. Who had the nicer watch? Who drove the newest SUV? Who had the more successful spouse? Mark started playing their game. One evening, he came home from a dinner and asked, "Why don't you try to get a better job?" I explained I liked my work. He was frustrated. Enough isn't how successful people think. Those words were borrowed from someone else. They weren't his. He started criticizing my clothes, my car, my friends. I compromised, bought nicer dresses, attended networking events I hated, smiled through conversations that left me drained. Nothing worked. His expectations kept moving. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about status. He didn't just want a wife who loved him. He wanted one who looked impressive standing next to him. As they carried out my belongings, family photos, a few books, my grandmother's quilt, Mark watched in silence. "Mrs. Harrison," Mark finally said to my mother, I didn't know." She met his eyes. "No," she said. "Did you ever ask?" The silence was deafening. Because no, he hadn't. Not once in 12 years. He'd asked colleagues about salaries and neighbors about home values, but he'd never asked about the woman who shared his life. Another SUV pulled up. My father stepped out, still tall and commanding at 72. Beside him was a silver-haired man in a charcoal suit. Mark's breathing became shallow. He knew that man. It was Robert Sterling, the CEO of the logistics corporation where Mark worked. Robert shook my father's hand warmly. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for meeting with the board. We look forward to finalizing the acquisition." Mark's face went white. He suddenly understood. His entire career was connected to my family. Robert turned to me. "Sarah, good to see you again." "You know each other?" Mark stammered. Robert chuckled. "I've known Sarah since she was a teenager." My father clarified. Robert served on our foundation board long before he became CEO. Mark looked sick. I don't understand." "No," I replied quietly. "I suppose you don't." Robert reported to my father that the acquisition was nearly complete. "Your division had solid sales numbers," he told Mark, "but also high employee turnover and some HR complaints." No accusation, just facts. That made it worse. My father placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. "We'll discuss business Monday." Robert nodded. "I hope everything works out for you personally." No threats, no intimidation. Just professionalism. Mark turned to my father. "Mr. Harrison, I didn't know."
Dad smiled faintly.
"You didn't know because you never wanted to know. 12 years, Mark. You never asked me how I started my career. You never asked Sarah about her childhood. You never wondered why we insisted she build her own life. You decided who we were without taking the time to learn." Mark rubbed his hands over his face. "I made a mistake." "You certainly did." The moment to leave arrived. I picked up the first box. Mark instinctively reached for it. "I'll carry that." I looked at him. For years, I would have accepted.
"Not today."
"No, thank you." His hand dropped. As the drivers loaded the cars, Mark followed me. "Sarah, please." I stopped. He deserved one last honest conversation. "I know you're angry," he said. "I didn't mean." "I know," I said. "You called me useless. You told my mother to pick me up like I was garbage." "I know." Tears filled his eyes. "I know." I looked for grief in his face. Instead, I saw fear. Fear of losing what he'd just discovered. That realization hurt more than the insults. "If my parents had shown up in a pickup truck," I asked, "would you still be apologizing?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. We both knew the answer. My mother squeezed my hand. "Ready?" "Almost." I turned to Mark. "I did love you," he said. "I believe you did. But somewhere along the way, you started loving success more. You stopped seeing me. You wanted a wife who looked expensive." I'm sorry. For the first time, I believed him. But sincerity doesn't erase consequences. "You didn't lose a wealthy wife today," I said. "You lost the only woman who loved you before success mattered." I got into the car. Mark hurried forward. "Sarah, I never cheated on you." It was a strange thing to say, as if faithfulness excused everything else. "I know," I answered, "but respect is part of marriage, too." The convoy pulled away. Through the tinted window, I saw Mark standing alone, the divorce papers scattered at his feet, rainwater washing them down the driveway. My mother held my hand. "You okay?" "I don't know." That's an honest answer. "I keep wondering if I failed." "No. You loved someone completely. That's never a failure." We didn't go to my parents' house. We went to a historic hotel overlooking the river. Employees were waiting. "Welcome home, Miss Harrison." Home. The word felt unfamiliar, but possible. People love stories where karma is instant. Justice, revenge, payoff. Life rarely works that way. What happened after wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and somehow more painful. 3 weeks later, my lawyer called. Mark wanted to revisit the property settlement. He says he wasn't fully aware of certain financial circumstances. You mean he didn't know my parents were wealthy? That's essentially what he's arguing. We're not changing anything. My parents refused to use money as a weapon. When Harrison Holdings acquired his company, my father said, "We judge employees by performance, not personal history." Mark's fate was his own. Unfortunately, his success had already been slipping. Without me holding his life together, he forgot meetings, missed deadlines, and alienated his team. 4 senior employees resigned in 6 months. Robert didn't fire him. He just postponed his promotions. Eventually, the position he wanted went to someone else. He leased an expensive downtown apartment, then couldn't afford it. The luxury SUV disappeared. The country club membership expired. His friends vanished. They were never real friends to begin with. The woman he'd been seeing left him with a note, "You're not the man you pretend to be." Meanwhile, my life was strange. I woke up at 6 every morning, reaching for someone who wasn't there.
Some days I cried.
Some days, I just stared at the ceiling. Healing isn't linear. My mother never rushed me. She knocked gently every morning. Breakfast. Sometimes I joined her. Sometimes I couldn't. My father invited me to lunch every Friday. We talked about baseball, fishing, old memories. He was telling me, without saying it, that I was more than someone's wife. 2 months later, my mother proposed a project. A foundation initiative for women leaving difficult marriages. "I want you to lead it." Why me? Because pain either makes you bitter or useful. I accepted. The work changed me. I met women whose stories humbled me. A nurse whose husband emptied their account, a grandmother raising 3 kids, a military wife abandoned during cancer treatment. Each one believed she wasn't enough. Week after week, I saw confidence return to them. Their victories reminded me that starting over isn't failure, it's courage. One evening, I saw myself on the news. Sarah Harrison, director of the New Beginnings Initiative, has helped over 200 women transition to stable housing. Across town, Mark saw the same broadcast. He sat and watched until the end. He finally saw the woman he'd overlooked. He realized what he'd truly lost wasn't money. It was character, standing faithfully beside him all along. I used to imagine revenge. I imagined Mark losing everything. But the anger just ran out. Carrying it was exhausting, like dragging a suitcase full of rocks. 18 months after the divorce, I got an email. Subject: "I owe you an apology." No excuses. Just, "I'm writing because I've finally become honest enough to admit what I did. You deserved a husband who respected you. Instead, I made you feel invisible." I didn't reply for a week. My parents offered advice. "You don't owe him a meeting," my mother said. "But you're wondering if hearing him might close the last door." I replied, "Saturday, 10 a.m., the coffee shop on Main." When he arrived, I barely recognized him. He wore jeans and work boots, not a tailored suit. He looked humbled. He didn't reach for a hug.
He just sat down.
"Thank you for coming." "You have an hour," he said. I was emotionally abusive. I kept telling myself I wasn't, because I never hit you. But I criticized everything. Your clothes, your career, your friends. I made you feel like you were never enough. And the worst part is, you kept trying harder. He brought a photograph. Our first apartment, our second Christmas. A tiny, mismatched tree. We looked happy. "I stared at this for hours," he said. "What did you see?" "Myself, before ambition became arrogance."
He'd been in counseling.
His therapist asked him, "When was the last time you admitted you were wrong?" without adding "but." He couldn't answer. He realized every apology was conditional. Never simply, "I'm sorry." "I'm not asking you to come back," he said. "I know we're over." I just couldn't pretend I was the victim anymore. I asked the question I'd carried for 2 years. "If my family had been poor, would you still have left?" He closed his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. The honesty hurt. It also healed. "Thank you." I said, for telling the truth. When we left, he reached for the check. I said, we'll split it. I stopped on the sidewalk. I forgive you. I'm not saying I forgot. I'm saying I don't want to carry this anymore. He wept. I don't deserve that. You don't. But forgiveness isn't earned. It's chosen. A week later, he apologized to my parents. My mother gave him one piece of advice. Never measure another person's worth by what they own. Character reveals itself eventually. Now, 3 years later, I've remarried a history teacher and widower. He listens. He sees me. My past explains me. It doesn't diminish me. Mark stepped down from management. He trains new hires now. He's patient. He admits mistakes. He tells young employees, don't confuse admiration with respect. We see each other at charity dinners. It's not awkward. It's quiet. Two people whose lives were once defined by pain, now helping others. People ask about the day my mother arrived. They expect me to say that was the turning point. It wasn't. The real moment came later, when I stopped valuing myself through someone else's eyes. When forgiveness became stronger than revenge. Your inability to see my value does not diminish it. Not then, not now, not ever. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about resilience and hope, please like and subscribe to Zarabell Stories.